long did you teach?
Not quite 40 years.
All at MSD?
Yes, I did 25 years of special ed at Metro North, and then another 3 years at Metro North for fourth grade. And then I moved to Sharp Creek when they reconfigured.
Okay.
I remember when COVID hit and my mom passed away, and I'm thinking, okay, I can't do both. I can't sanitize the golf carts, flip the cheeseburgers, keep an eye on my dad, make lesson plans, and do all that. And so I went up to Dad. So earlier I'd asked him, I said, are you ready for me to retire and come join you at the golf course? No, you keep on teaching. You're doing good things there. So I remember sitting down with him. I said, Dad, I think I'm going to not go back to teaching this year. And he kind of put his head down. I remember he was in his 80s, and he said, well, I guess so, but I really wanted you to have a career in teaching. I said, Dad, do you realize I've taught for over 35 years? And he kind of looked at me like he hadn't thought of that, that I had had a career in teaching. And
Well, JoDee, I think that is a great place to start this episode of ThriveIN Wabash County. If you hadn't picked up on it, in the studio with me tonight is Devin Dale and his mom, JoDee Dale, and the owners of Etna Acres Golf Course. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, good to be here.
JoDee, it's like you read my mind, and I wanted to start with your family's history and how this golf course came about. And you've mentioned your dad, and doing a little research, which I like to do. I like to come in prepared. Back in 1960, it sounds like they opened up the golf course. What do you remember? And I know you probably weren't even born when the golf course was first brought to life, but what do you remember about those early days?
I don't remember a lot. I do remember the building of number 6 green. I remember the people. I love hearing the stories when people come back and say, oh, I was here when I helped build the golf course, or your dad gave me my first golf lessons. I remember the dances they used to have. I remember when we didn't have golf carts. And you think about Dad's vision. I mean, he grew up in Huntington, played sports, had a choice to do a couple different things, ended up going to Hanover, played golf, met my mom through another series of choices, made a decision to come back to teach in Huntington, brought my mom, who knew nothing about golf, nothing at all. And he was a teacher in the Huntington schools before they consolidated, started golf there. He just had a dream. He was the assistant golf professional up at Plymouth Country Club. And one day he calls his dad and he says, I want to build a golf course. Because when he grew up, there weren't a lot of public golf courses. He had a love for the game of golf, but they traveled to it, and it wasn't always affordable. Mm-hmm. He caddied at La Fontaine Golf Course, which is now the Maple Grove. But he came back and he wanted to make sure kids had a desire to golf. And so he started that. And so he called his dad up one day and he said, I want to build a golf course. And he says, my dad said yes, and my mom in the background said no. And so we laugh about it. But he took 40 acres of farmland and cow pasture, and with the help of the uncles and different people in the community, he built the golf course. I came along in 61, and I remember vaguely the building of number 6 green, so that came in the late 60s that they added that. And everybody thought he was building a whole new 9 holes, because back then most courses were 9 holes. And they started, adding on to their golf courses in the area. And I really wish I had recorded some of his stories as he talks about it. It's hard to remember some of them, but I just remember that. And the feeling of family. Everybody knew everybody. It was a little slower pace, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. And then in 1990, they purchased the land south and then built the second 9.
Bought an additional 40 acres? Or?
Close to that. Okay. I don't remember.
We're about 150 acres in total. So the original 9 was 40, and then bought another 30-ish. Mm-hmm. So another, 80 acres on the other side.
Okay. So when your dad first opened that, it was a 9-hole course?
Yes.
And that was on 124 side, mm-hmm. closer to 124.
There was nothing there.
I got to imagine there's not a lot in that area now.
Correct. And so think about when you have to plant. So there were soybeans there. And so they plowed up the soybeans. And what I laughed is Devin's married to Kelly, and her grandmother remembers driving as a newlywed, I believe, down 124, and she and her husband thought coffee was nuts. My grandfather.
Yeah, they had farmers parked on the side of 124, and a very Field of Dreams-esque of farmers looking out, watching them plow under beans going, what are they going to do? They're going to build a what? And like, if you've seen the movie, you understand that idea of they're getting rid of crop to build a golf course. You know, so like in the movie, it's if you build it, he will come. Like if you build it, golfers will come. And, you know, for 65 years now, they have been coming, which is kind of a cool thing that there was nothing there. They built it and put something there, expanded, grew it, and grew people alongside it. And then it continues to bring people back. So that's kind of a cool connection.
JoDee, did you ever imagine in your early days as a teenager running around the golf course, or even when you're 20s and 30s, that you would ever be in the position you are now at the golf course?
I loved being there. I don't know that I ever thought of mom and dad being gone and not being there and being in charge. But I always knew it was just a big part of my life. Growing up, when I did, we lived at the golf course. I played there. I've always been there. And so I can't imagine what I would have done if I hadn't been.
And I'm sure we'll get into that, because owning a golf course like that, you don't have a huge staff. And so you're there early in the morning and you're there late in the evenings in those summer days when people are playing from dawn to dusk. And you end up having to live there like most small business owners do.
And it wasn't always like that. I was remembering that my dad owned one pair of shoes, and we lived on Dora Road. And I remember hiding his shoes the night before, so he'd have to wake me up to find out where his shoes were. And we would go to the golf course. I learned how to play cards with my dad. And we didn't have that early morning play. And so golf has kind of evolved where now people want that morning play, and they're out there early playing. And it's a little, I don't know, if quicker pace. You know, we didn't have a lot of golf carts. I vaguely remember driving the old golf carts when I was little, and people would walk down, they would walk around the golf course, and now people want to take a cart. They want to play pretty quick. And so that part has changed in golf. I just remember it being a little more relaxed. I laugh that I remember a couple couples, they'd tee off on number one. They'd walk down the fairway, pulling their clubs, holding hands. They'd get to where their balls were at. They'd separate. They'd go hit. They'd come back and meet in the middle. And I was talking about that to the Bickles, I think, this winter. They were talking about they used to do that.
And we'll get back to this, but you talk about how this kind of slower pace of life, we weren't in a hurry to get to the next thing. And I'm curious, and maybe this is something just for you to think about, and we'll get back to it later, but the sport of golf seems like most things, it ebbs and flows in its demand. And as our lives have gotten busier and our kids are involved in sports and we're driving from here to there, that maybe that pace of golf has hurt itself in the amount of time that it takes. So let's tee that up for a little bit later in the episode. Let's come back to that, okay? So at some point, Devin comes along. Have you always been into golf? It's what mom did. It's what grandpa did. Is that just part of you, Devin?
Yeah, so it is me. You know, golf is such a part of, I think, who I am, that it's always been that way. I grew up at the golf course. I learned how to mow greens in elementary school, walk mow them. So you get there before the sun comes up, you know, before 6 o'clock. You would walk mow your greens. It would take me, I did holes 10, 11, 12, and 14. And if I did them as fast as humanly possible, I had it timed out to about an hour and 32 minutes, like clockwork. And so I worked at the golf course, lived at the golf course. And so golf, you know, like mom, was so much of my childhood that I loved being at the golf course. I loved, you know, kind of doing my own thing, but then having people around and having family around was awesome too.
Yeah. And you took it to a level that you are actually PGA, what did I read? You're a PGA member since 2020. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I went to college. I wanted to play golf in college, but I didn't want to go far enough away where my family couldn't come watch me play. Not that I was really good to go anywhere too far away, but I wanted to stay close so that I was closer. So that was important. And then I graduated with a history education degree. And I tell people that now I have the history side of my degree to think critically about the world and be knowledgeable about things that are going on. And then I have the education side to teach golf. So I tell people I totally wasted my degree. I just use it differently than a classroom setting. So I student taught, and then I student taught in the fall after I technically had finished all of my coursework at Huntington. Student taught in the fall, and then they had a position open up for an English job. So I spent the spring, when typically now you're starting to think about the golf season. I was in full-on teacher mode because, that's what I had seen from my parents, that they were teachers, and so I thought I can teach, and I just hated it. I had a classroom with no windows, so I would have to walk out to the hall every passing period and look down, and I would see on these beautiful spring days, I could tell it was awesome, and I'm like, I am not at the golf course. That's where I want to be. I don't want to be teaching 7th grade English it was hour and a half classes, block scheduling. So I had 7th graders in a classroom for an hour and a half, and that was a lot. And it's really become something that I went to Gene and said, hey, I don't want to teach. I want to be in the golf business. I want to go through the PGA. And this was towards the end of the school year. And he said, well, finish the school year and then we'll talk. So I finished the school year. I said, hey, I already told him I'm not coming back next year. I want to go ahead and start going through the PGA. And he says, okay. He says, work a little bit and come back to me later this summer. And so I worked for another month or so. I came back and I said, hey, I am all in on this. I want to do this. And he said, okay. And we went ahead and started going through that. And there's 3 different levels of the PGA. So it's kind of at your own pace. There's coursework. And at that time I would fly down to Florida in the winter for my in-person seminars. And then I would come back, take my test, and submit all my bookwork. And I did that for 3 years. And so I became a member. I finished everything in October of 2020. And so for a very small period of time, from October to April of 21, we got to say that Etna Acres had 2 PGA members on staff. We had myself and we had my grandpa. We had 2 PGA members on staff, which is kind of a cool little niche thing.
Earlier you mentioned Gene, your grandfather, and who were giving credit for starting this golf course. It's now been around for almost 66 years. I imagine that as you go to him and you say, hey, teaching, it's not where I want to be. I want to be in the golf business. And I think you mentioned earlier, JoDee, that he was a teacher, and then you've been a teacher and now worked with the golf course. I'm putting myself in his shoes, and that he has been in both situations, and how he's supporting you as his grandson in teaching that is impactful for our community. It's stable. You're going to have a job and a steady paycheck, but he's also has that passion of running a golf course, even though he knows that there's going to be tough seasons, tough years, that there may not always be somebody to show up and play golf. But he realized the passion that you had to support that. That speaks a lot about that relationship that you and him had together, that he could trust you, that you were really following your dreams.
Well, he was Superman. My grandpa was, if anybody listening to this knew Gene, he was unbelievable. I mean, he was larger than life without being larger than life. He truly knew everything. He had an answer for everything, but he was soft-spoken about it. He knew everything without needing you to know that he knew everything. He knew all the facets of the business. He was intelligent. He worked incredibly hard and had a passion for getting people to, I wouldn't say getting people to love the game, but getting people to enjoy the game. Not everybody loves it, but they would love coming out because they could see how much he loved golf. And it's kind of cool that, there were people that would come out to the golf course just to hang out. They just wanted to come out and see him and talk to him. And if I go play 9 holes, I go play 9 holes. But it's kind of cool to just go hang out.
And it didn't matter where he went. Everywhere he went, he talked golf with people.
Yep.
He could be in the hospital room and he'd be asking the ladies, so have you been out to play some golf? Or I remember giving you lessons. Or did you do anything with a set of golf clubs? I mean, he talked golf with everybody and loved it.
Etna Acres, I've been taking my boys out there since they were little. They've gone through the youth clinics that you guys put on over the summers. You do I don't want to call it father-son tournament because it's more than just father-son. There's moms and daughters, but you do different tournaments that are really geared towards youth and to the non-serious golfer. Person likes to go out. They may only get to play a handful of times a year, but they do enjoy it. Tell me about when did all of that start, and how has, I'm assuming that your grandfather, this was a belief of his, obviously, like you talked about. He wanted people to have the opportunity to love and enjoy golf. How have you been able to take what he started and create what's out there now?
I think in any business, you just take what was before and you just try to make it a little better. And, you know, Mom and I have talked that there have been things in the business that we've changed, but even now we still think about, man, what would Gene and Joby think about this? Like, would they think this is a good idea? Maybe not, but we think it's a really good idea. And then there's other times where we're like, man, we can't do that. Like, that is not the, that's not the right decision to make. So you just take whatever somebody else has done and you try to make it better. And so junior golf was always a focus of theirs. And those junior senior tournaments that you guys would play in, those are awesome. And they kind of ebbed and flowed in popularity, but I think we had over 20 kids and adults play in the one last year, which is a lot. I mean, you put 40 people on a 9 holes of golf course and you're playing alternate shot. It's a pretty time-intensive thing, but what a great opportunity to get kids to experience golf, get adults to experience golf with their kids or with their nephews and nieces. What a cool opportunity to get them on the golf course in a casual setting.
And go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say that is the same thing that my dad did. I remember being part of our junior swing classes. I remember the whole week. I remember we started with the 7-iron. We started with the grip, the posture. We went on to the hybrids. We went on to the drivers. And then we did a little thing on Friday with the kids. So the format hasn't changed. We have a few more people that have played, but it's really cool to have people come back and say, I remember taking this junior swing class. I want my son to do that, or my grandson to do that.
Yeah, there are a few things that are like original. They're from the beginning. And the junior swing class, it's always the first week of June, and it's been the first full week of June for 60 years. I mean, it's just always been that part of the calendar. And so people have gotten accustomed to that. They're used to that. And it's one of the few things that goes back to the very beginning. I mean, it is like core Etna Acres junior swing class. We've had 50 kids participate in that, an average of 50 kids, I think, the last 3 years.
Wow.
So it's really grown. It's grown to a point where now we have to really recruit people to help out, adults to help out, and make sure that we've got a pretty good ratio of adults to kids so we don't have some recklessness, but it's fun.
Well, besides the passion that your grandfather obviously had to share the sport, I bet in the back of his mind he also knew that if he could expose the game to younger generation, it was going to be easier to keep them around to play when they were older adults or even retirees versus trying to convert somebody who's never played in their life and now they're 40 years old and they're invited to their first golf scramble for a work function and they're like, nope, not me, right? So, it was brilliant. It really was. And I got to imagine that a lot of other courses, not just in our area, but all over, have to appreciate the family courses like yours that have educated the golfers at a young age on the etiquette, on the rules of the game, so that later on, when they're invited to a nicer course, they know the rules of the game. They know what's expected of them. So I can't imagine the number of people that Etna Acres has impacted over the last 66 years.
You know, it's even in the small time that I've kind of been at the golf course, I've seen kids, you know, grow up, graduate, get married, and have kids. And, you know, I just am in my early 30s, and I feel like I've been around the golf course long enough to see all those things. And so it really, you see it for generations even now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty neat.
And I think it's caught on a lot of places. I mean, I think about the first tee that started, and Devin jumped on that. And your goal was to get a golf club in every kiddo's hand in Wabash County. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we work with the First Tee of Indiana, which is a grassroots growing the game organization. And so this was our second winter going into the schools, and that was was something like you said that Gene wanted to do was get kids involved, get beginners involved. And so we wanted to go into the schools in the winter, and the first tee provided the equipment. And so we were able this year to do Southwood Elementary and Sharp Creek Elementary. And, you know, I kind of would like to expand that in the future, and would love to say that in 5 years, I've got a golf club in all of the Wabash County kids in elementary. And because I don't want to have that person be 40 years old and say, hey, would you like to play in this golf outing? And they have no idea how to play golf. They don't have clubs. They've never experienced it. And so one of my purposes is I want to eliminate that. I don't want there to be an excuse of, well, I've never done this. I've never tried it. Nobody in my family does it. It's too expensive. Well, at least in 5th grade, you will have touched a club.
Yeah.
Like you'll have put your hands on there in 5th grade, and sure, that might be 30 years in the past, but at least, you know, hopefully you still remember, you know, where your hands go and how you stand, and so that you can eliminate that. Now that's looking way into the future, but I think it starts at the early ages, you know, in that 10 to 12 age range.
Well, and I always have had this belief that golf is one of those sports that can give back to you your entire life. You may have 5 and 6 years old out there playing for their very first time, and then you can be in your 80s and play the game. And you can't say that about too many other sports, football or basketball. You know, they're too physical, but the enjoyment of the game is something that you never can lose when you're out there golfing and taking it at whatever pace that is for you. And it's also adapted. I mean, the golf has tee boxes set up so that if you're 80 years old, you're hitting from somewhere different than the guy that's 20 that can hit the ball 150 yards further than you. So I think it's an amazing sport if you give into it, it will give back to you forever.
One of the coolest days is the Tuesday of our junior swing class. So that first full week in June, that Tuesday is always our senior league in the mornings. So our senior league starts at 9:00 and our junior swing class starts at 9:00. So, you know, if you think about 50-ish kids coming in, checking into the golf course or the clubhouse, and then they all go out towards the range, while I have 40 to 50 senior men coming in to check in, go get their coffee, and sit in the other room. I mean, it's a lot in a small period of time. But I think this past year I know we had at least 2 5-year-olds in our junior swing class, and I know we had seniors on that Tuesday that were over 90. So I had, say, a 90-year-old and a 5-year-old at the golf course at the same time doing the same thing, you know, in different ways, you know, and they both had fun, you know. That's the cool thing about golf is anybody can do it at any age, whenever.
It's also a unique sport that it humbles us at any given moment. No matter how long you've been playing, how good you are, it can humble you very quickly. But it also leaves you with hope after that the next shot may be the best ever, right?
Yeah.
And one of those best shot moments is a hole-in-one, obviously. And I follow your social media, and you guys do a tremendous job of highlighting the hole-in-ones. Pictures almost, it seems like during the summer, it's like every week there's at least a hole-in-one out there. How did that tradition start as far as honoring those hole-in-one golfers, and especially on social media? And what does that give you as the course pro, the course superintendent, that when somebody like that can score maybe their only hole-in-one in life?
I don't know where it started. For years, we've always given a flag away, and Mom has great handwriting, so she's the designated handwriter. I don't know what would happen if she wasn't there and somebody hit a hole-in-one and we had to use my handwriting. I need to work on my penmanship. And so they've always gotten a new flag, new stock flag. We put their name on it. We put the hole. We put the date, and then we either will write their players that they played with name, or they can have the players sign it. You know, so you can have your buddies sign it that they witnessed it, and that's really cool. I have mine from when I actually hit one in the junior senior tournament when I was 12, and so we were playing. There was 3 kids and 3 adults, and so I think my flag has like 5 signatures on it. And then there might have been like grandma and grandpa watching and a spectator card, so their signature might be on it. And so I even have that core memory, and so it is fun. I don't know where it started, but we continue to do it, and it's fun.
Oh, I know it started after we opened the new 9, but on our golf course, we've got some plaques back near the restrooms. We like the history. My dad loved the history of golf. And so I remember he asked my husband, Gary, who's very good with woodworking, he wanted to create something to keep track of the hole-in-ones. And we have a plaque, and we will have their name and the year and the hole number engraved on it. And then we stick it up every year. And it's fun to watch different people go back and say, it's still here. My name is still here. Or they'll drag their son in and say, I want you to see I did get a hole-in-one here. And I think someone was, it goes back to 1960 something. We were able to find the scorecards early and vouched for them, and they're on there, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah. This question's to either one of you, but just for our listeners that haven't been out to Etna Acres, describe the golf course. It's a unique course in that it's kind of two different styles. The original 9 and the back 9 are kind of designed in two different styles. Either one of you like to talk about that?
Sure. So the front 9 is still very traditional. I tell people it's like what you see at most golf courses in Indiana. It's flat, and in spaces it has some undulation changes, but it's tree lined, small targets, small target fairways, small target greens, because some of those holes are the original holes from 1960. So holes 1 and 3 are both original, and then we have original greens on number 1, number 2, number 3, the putting green, 4 green, and that's it. Those are the only original greens left. So of the original 40 acre 9-hole golf course, so the original 9, the front 9 is very traditional, and then the back that was opened in 93 is links style. So bigger fairways, bigger greens. More people enjoy the back if they don't hit it very well because they have more room to hit it. They have more room to miss it. But it's a totally different 9 from what you see at a lot of places around here. You can stand on the black tees of number 10, and you can see every flag on the back 9. So you can see the 60-plus acres back there on the back 9. You can see every flag and how the course kind of weaves back there. But there are no trees on the interior of that 9. So it's pretty intimate with nature, and then it makes it fun to have two distinct sides. So I tell people that have never been there, you might struggle on the front. You might lose some balls on the front, but when you come in and you make the turn, know that when you go out to the back, it will be better.
I can say you can lose balls on the back, though.
You can.
There's water back there.
There are some ponds back there, but the back, I tell people, you almost never have to get the ball in the air on the back 9. So with the exception of number 12, the par 3 back in the woods, you can roll it the entire back 9. The ball never has to get up in the air, and you can play that way. On the front, there are some holes where you actually have to hit it maybe over a creek or over something. But on the back, you can roll it everywhere, and we can all relate to rolling it a time or two.
The humbled part of golf that I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about, as I teed up earlier, a little bit about the ebbs and flows of golf. And there's been times where golf is a super popular sport. As an outsider, I think of when Tiger Woods is coming up. And I mean, everybody's watching Tiger. Everybody wants to be Tiger and go out there and hit the ball forever. But then there's also been some tough times in golf. And maybe that's economic reasons. People can't afford to go out there. The golf course has seen a lot over its 66 years. How has the golf course persevered during those tough times? And then how do you continue to pour in, even when it's not the best times, but knowing that good times are coming?
Well, there's a lot in that one. Yes, golf has changed and seen different popularity. As I alluded to earlier, it was a little slower, didn't have as many, but you knew everybody. And then I think, as you said, different professional golfers have come along. I mean, Arnie's Army came along and really brought golf along. And then when you had the baby boomers, there was a time when they said we had to open a golf course every day to accommodate all the baby boomers when they retired. And that's why you had an influx of lots of golf courses in the area.
Wow.
So I think maybe we started out with maybe 200 some early, and now we're up to over 400. And that doesn't count those that have been since closed. too many golf courses were open and couldn't sustain then after the baby boomers passed away. Does that make sense?
That was 400 in the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there's been some changes with that. Golf is changed, has become more popular because now you can ride a cart. And I think it's helped keep more people playing golf and enjoying it. I think a lot of golf courses do enjoy having the youth come, and so that kind of helps.
I think everything is in a little bit of a cycle. So if you think about when a lot of golf courses were built in the 60s, golf was pretty popular in the 60s, relatively speaking. There were a lot of private clubs that were established in the 19-teens, very old traditional country clubs. There wasn't a lot of public access courses built until the 60s. And a lot of courses were built in the 60s, and then golf kind of went through a slower time. There were some great personalities and some great professional players, but golf went through a slower time. And then you saw a lot of courses built in the 90s. Golf was good. The economy was pretty good. And so golf courses were built. The popularity, I believe that was a Golf Digest article. I'm not sure exactly what year, but there was a Golf Digest article that quoted that a new golf course had to be built every day for a year to sustain the growth of the game. And so we overbuilt golf courses in the 90s, and we had too many then in the 2000s when the economy declined, popularity declined. If I have a lot of discretionary income, it's hard to say, you know what, I'm going to go spend, $500 and be a member, or I'm going to go spend a couple $100 and get some new clubs. If you don't have that money to spend, golf is not as popular. And so right now, golf is really popular. People have a little bit of extra money to spend, and I'm not blind to understanding that you have to have money to play golf. It's not as expensive, I think, as people think it needs to be, but it does go through ebbs and flows as a business of being popular, but it's also tied to, having some money and having some fun people to watch. Tiger was cool in the early 2000s, but that doesn't mean we were bringing a lot of new people into the game in the 2000s. It was kind of the established people like myself that were born in the 90s that kind of grew up with Tiger. Well, we were already playing. Tiger himself, he kind of brought some, but not as many as maybe people think.
Yeah. And it's interesting to layer those different influences, the popularity of an athlete versus what's the economic impact at that time, and does that translate to maybe 5 years down the road when the economics change, even though maybe you don't have that star athlete anymore? I mean, it's a lot that plays into it.
Well, it's interesting right now. I was talking with a friend of mine in town. Scotty Scheffler right now is the best player in the world, and he is the closest thing that any of us that know golf have seen to Tiger since Tiger. I don't know the stats that he had, but he'd played like the last 40 events. He'd finished in the top 10 like well over half the time. In the last 3 events, he's shot over par the first round and finished tied for third, tied for second. I mean, that's Tiger-ish, and he's been the best player in the world for a couple of years now. But I don't know that people really have quite captured that, that like, man, this guy is the closest thing we've seen to Tiger. But I don't know that he is as much of a personality. Like Tiger he had an aura around him. I don't know that Scotty Scheffler is enough of an aura to kind of bring new people into the game.
But then the distractions that we have in society too. We've got our phones, we've got the TikToks and the YouTubes and all the other things going on, including this podcast. But back when Tiger was getting started, and I can't remember exactly where I was at, but I mean, we didn't have Facebook and Instagram and all those other things. It's like you tuned in and you watched it live on TV. You weren't going to go back and watch it, necessarily later. It wasn't just something you could pull up and watch the highlights. And so you kind of had to invest into it, whether you were playing or not. You were investing your time into it. Now it's just like 10 seconds here and there. We're moving on to the next thing. So, but Scotty is a dominant player.
Like you said, everything is quicker and faster. As a society, we're quicker and faster, and golf is not, but it's gotten quicker. But like you said, I can just pull up highlights of Tiger from 2000. Well, but if you weren't there, you didn't get to experience that. And I'm not a Tiger fan by any means. Anybody out there listening, like, they know I'm not the biggest Tiger fan. You kind of fell into 2 camps as a kid. You were either a Tiger fan or a Phil fan. And I was the Phil fan. I rooted for the underdog guy, and I wasn't the biggest Tiger fan, but you could pull up those highlights in a second. It's he was pretty good.
I remember, watching like the Masters or something. And it was probably on CBS back then, and the tension of the golfers walking up the final fairway, to make that putt on who was going to close this out, somebody going to cave. But you don't get that when you're just watching the final couple shots, and you don't have that 4-minute gap of them walking up the fairway and the tension's building. Even if you're sitting at home, 1,000 miles away, you're still feeling that. And so what my recommendation is that you go out to Etna Acres and you get a club. And if you've never done it before, reach out to Devin. You guys do lessons out there. Get a lesson scheduled, or bring your son and let's do a father-son or a mother-daughter, a junior-senior tournament this next year, and get out there and get active, put the phones away for a little bit, and just enjoy the peace and calm that golf can bring.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about golf is that you can stop for 4 hours or 2 hours if you play 9 holes and just not do anything else but focus on that. And if it's by yourself, that's great. If you're doing it with other people, that's even better. But you stop. I don't think about work. I don't think about what I'm going to have for dinner after this. I'm just being present with what I'm doing and the people I'm doing it with. And then I can get back to work or life, when I finish. But for 4 hours, I get to do this. I get to play golf. I don't have to play golf. I get to do this.
I wanted to talk about, obviously you've talked about the history. Your dad had an appreciation for the history, and Devin, you have an appreciation for history as a teacher. A lot of things have changed at the golf course over the last 66 years. But most recently, a vision of your grandfather's you helped bring to life. You want to talk a little bit about that and that change of the green?
Oh, of 9 green?
9 green.
So that's a cool kind of final story of his. Not the final story, but kind of his kind of final act, his final fingerprint on the golf course. So we had talked for years. The original number 9 green, if anybody remembers it, it was like a 45-degree angle, and it was about 900 square feet. I mean, there was not a lot of square footage, and it was almost vertical. You couldn't put the pin towards the top as golf technology changed and we started mowing greens shorter and mowing them every day. Putting the pin at the top of a 45-degree angle, if you don't get it up there, it just rolls back to your feet. And it became really unmaintainable to make it fun for people. I mean, you could put a pin up there and it would just be miserable. I mean, it would just roll off the green. And so we knew that it needed to be changed. But for us, as a small time course, that's a big deal when you think about, hey, we have to totally revamp this green. None of it can be kept the way it is. We can't just add on to the green and reshape it. Like, it needs to be blown up. And that was a big decision that took us kind of several years to talk about and plan about and think about. And so my grandfather sketched out the original kind of drawing, and he sketched out, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to put the base layers in. Here's the guy we're going to use. And, he wrote his phone number down. He wrote down the diagram for what it's going to look like, did the blueprint of it. Here's what it's going to look like. And we still have that paper. We actually framed it this winter just for fun to make sure that we always had it. But then he passed away, and we started that project without him. And so I believe he passed away in the spring of that year, and we'd already kind of contracted that project to begin.
But because of supplies,
we couldn't start it when we wanted to. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of finally started the project, and it was kind of a weird thing that we were finishing something that we had started a couple years prior. And that was a big project for us. We didn't really know what we were doing, but fortunately I had enough people in the business that I know that helped me, that said, hey, here's how we have to lay the drainage. Here's where we need to put irrigation in. And I'd like to think that I am smart enough to know that if I can't do it, and I know that somebody else is an expert at it, they can kind of tell me what I need to do. And so I had a couple seed experts that helped me on, hey, here's the grass seed we're going to put on the rough, and that's going to be different from the grass seed that we're going to put on the fringe and the approach, and that's going to be different than the ones that we put on the green. And so we kind of put a lot of heads together to make it happen, but now it's in this past year was its first full season. We opened at Memorial Day of 24. And so it's kind of grown, but it looks like it's always been there. I mean, if you stand at the top of number 9 and look at it from 250 yards away, it looks now like it's always been there. And that's kind of a cool thing. If you play it now for the first time, if I don't tell you it's a new green or a recently new green, you know, somebody's not going to know that. But then when you tell them the story behind it, like, man, that's really cool. Like, and then you know, now if we have that framed and we put it up, we can go, now this is the original design. And they're like, oh, that's what it looks like. And yeah, that's what he came up with.
That is a really, really cool story. And I'm sorry that he wasn't there to see it, but to know that he did have his thumbprint on some of those final decisions and what it looked like and that it needed to change and that you guys could together make that happen is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's part of, I think, any business, but especially a family business, is you have to grow it moving forward, but you still have to tell the stories of what has been there before. You know, if you don't tell the stories, somebody's not going to know, and they don't think about it. But if you tell them that story, if somebody comes in and they go, oh man, I just made a long putt for birdie. Oh, no. And I go, oh, number 9? They're like, yeah. I said, well, that's because it's a new green. That's why you made that putt. And then you start telling that story and like, wow, that's really cool. Like you don't get that storytelling, I think, at maybe other places. And so continuing to tell the stories of the past is a neat thing.
Tell us a little bit about what it's like to work so closely together as family members in this now 3rd generation business. During the summer, I mean, I've gone out there before. You guys are both out there just like we said earlier, from really morning to night. You guys are pouring into the business. What it's like to work so closely together as a mother, son.
Actually, it's 4 generations because my grandfather was there and started it.
That's right.
My grandfather, Devin's great-grandfather, which is kind of cool when you think about the history there. There are days we like each other. There are days that we kind of scratch our heads and we support each other and just say, okay. My mom used to laugh and say that any time that Dad would vanish all of a sudden, and that was his way to kind of get away and get some peace and quiet and get something done. So sometimes you just kind of vanish and go do something else for a little bit. But I think because I grew up, it was always family, that I just kind of instilled that in Devin, that you make it work. You work out. If you have differences, you talk things out. We don't make quick decisions. We kind of bring it up.
I think that's a Dale trait. I think in general, that's a family thing.
We think about it. We don't. Maybe it's a Quaker. I don't know. You make the decision after you've had lots of discussions about it and the pros and cons. And we wear lots of hats in a small business. I laugh. They'll say, I want to talk to the golf professional. I say, you can talk to Devin. Somebody, okay, I want to talk to the superintendent. I said, you'll talk to Devin. I want to talk to the who orders. You want to talk to Devin. You don't have that in a lot of other businesses. I mean, we fill out the paperwork. It's all family doing it and responsible for it, and then making sure we get it done. Yeah,
but I'm pretty quick that if somebody calls and they want to talk to the owner, I'm pretty quick to hand the phone over. Oh, yep, give me a second. I'll go find her. Yeah, you wear a lot of hats in the business. And, like I started, learning how to work out on the golf course. That was kind of my start in the game, was starting out there mowing greens, mowing fairways. And so being in the owner-operator side of it, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. And I think that's what made my grandpa so unbelievable, was that he knew the mechanics. He knew how to take something apart and fix it, but then he could also go out there and give you a lesson and get you to stop slicing it. And he didn't go change clothes to do this. He might be greasy, nasty, and, he would go in there and just clean his hands up, and then he'd meet you out there to go give a lesson. Or he'd help you out with getting a kid fit for some clubs right after he had just tore a reel off of a mower. And just really cool things that you kind of have to know everything and a little bit about everything. And then you rely on other people if it's out of your league. But you kind of have to know everything in a small business.
What does the future look like at Etna Acres? Are there any plans for additional changes to greens or growth or changes to the youth leagues or trainings that you guys have that you put on every summer?
So I kind of mentioned it a little bit. I would like to continue in the winters to do the school programming. So I would love to get golf in all of the schools. So definitely all the elementary schools. We're already at Sharp Creek and Southwood Elementary, and so next winter I would love to see if I could get into some other Wabash County elementary schools, because I would love to see golf be thought about like football, basketball, baseball. You know, baseball is huge in our community, basketball is huge in our state, and football is just the biggest sport in general. And I would love for golf to be included in that. It is different than the other sports, but I think popularity, we have an opportunity to grow it and be something that is thought about as, yes, it's the only sport you can play for life, but it's also a ton of fun. And you can be terrible at golf and have fun with it. And so that, junior-wise, I would love to continue to do that off-season. The golf course itself, I think time will tell what it looks like. You know, the golf industry goes through ups and downs, and right now we're in an up. But we're not going to stay in an up for 20 years. You know, it's going to go back the other way. And so I think being adaptable when people have less money to spend, I think we're in a weird point in the golf business where I've seen it, the prices go up, costs go up, and then at some point the bottom is going to fall out. You know, right now we're selling drivers for $649. I don't know that there's a future where, you know, too far away where we're selling drivers for $899. Well, I can't imagine that. I can't wrap my head around spending $650 for a driver. I mean, that's an investment. So the golf business is going to change. The golf course will just have to change with it. And so, you know, meeting the demands of people, you know, when they come out is going to be important. But I don't know specifically what the golf course changes will be. We'll just adapt to whatever we need to.
I think we always tweak a little something. You have a wish list. I think it's always good to have a wish list or a goal list of things that, is this the year to do this? Will this make the course better? Will it make it more sustainable? You know, we didn't always have irrigation. You know, we didn't put the irrigation in until in the 80s as far as automatic irrigation. Now I remember as a little girl riding in the golf cart, and Dad, we had a sprinkler just around the golf green. And so you'd go out and you'd plug the hose in, you'd move it, and then later in the evening, you all went out and got in the cart and you moved the sprinkler down. So I think as things change, we kind of adapt. How do we change to make things better?
And I think for us, it's, you know, we will still always kind of think about what previous generations would have thought. You know, that we'll always have that thought in our head of, you know, what would they think about this? And, you know, I have a kind of a particular look that I told Mom and Dad, and I'm on a sightline kick. So I want to have a good look when you're looking at it from the tee. I want to clean up some sight lines and some brush lines and things like that. But that's only going to last so long. And then I'll have to find something else that I'm kind of looking for. And, you know, this is kind of what I want to change. And I think one thing that we've found in the business, but we see it at the golf course, is as people get older, our forward set of tees is a little longer than a lot of courses. So like older gals or older men that come out to play, the golf course might be a little long for them. And so one thing we've talked about is how do we make the golf course shorter for that person that doesn't hit it as far, that's aging, but it's also going to be something that we can feasibly put in where we can get irrigation to that new tee station. And so that's something we don't have a concrete plan on where we're going to put new tees in, but we have kind of figured out that we need to make the golf course maybe a little shorter for some of those folks that the golf course is too long for. Because if it's taking me 7 or 8 swings to get to the green, that's not fun.
Yeah.
You know, let's move up, get closer to the hole, you know, start closer and have more fun. If you're on the green in 3, that's a whole lot more fun than putting for 8.
Very true. But that's me a lot of times. I want to thank both of you for coming into the studio, but also for pouring into this family business and our community in a way that a lot of other people can't. You've touched the youth, whether it's through your teaching in the classroom or at the golf course. You guys have actually changed generations of kids between yourselves and your past generations. So thank you for doing that. I know that you've had a big impact on my boys and our relationship with golf. And if it wasn't for Etna Acres, I don't know that my boys would have had that. So thank you so much for that. I like to end some of my conversations with kind of a quick rapid fire question round. Are you guys up for that?
Sure.
Go for it.
All right. Just jump in as you want. Early tee time or a twilight round?
I would say twilight round.
I like twilight.
Twilight, okay. Favorite hole on the golf course?
11.
Oh, you've always liked 11, yeah. Gosh. I think 16's beautiful.
Toughest hole at Etna Acres?
Oh, there's no
4.
doubt. Hole 4. That is the hardest hole in 3 counties, I think.
I can't vision where 4 is at.
So 4, you tee off back there, the tree line down the right, great big tree in the creek, and the creek is out there about 190, 200 yards. So you either have to lay up or hit it over the creek, up the hill. It's narrow, and then the out of bounds, the tree line goes all the way down the right. You've got a pond. The green is as big as this studio, and that is by far the hardest hole. There's big trees around the green. So anybody that comes, they always say, the stretch of holes 4, 5, and 7, that's like amen corner of being really hard.
Okay. Go-to snack at the clubhouse?
Oh, do cheeseburgers count as snacks?
Yes, me too.
Our glorified snack bar.
Yeah, come for the golf, stay for the cheeseburger, but cheeseburger it's known certainly around the area, probably around the state a little bit, that, you can come to Etna Acres, you can play golf, and then you can stay and have a really good cheeseburger after you finish playing, and that's worth the trip too. After
Mom and Dad passed, I know this is not part of your quick fire, but they would call up and say, "Are you still doing the cheeseburgers?" Yes, we're still doing the cheeseburgers. So it's just been around for a long time.
Well, I have to plug Tyler Olson on this. So when Tyler Olson was a junior golfer, I was in like elementary school, but I remember Tyler would come out to play in some of the state junior tournaments at the course, and he would say, well, if I play bad, I'm going to have a cheeseburger after I'm finished either way. And if I play really good, I might have 2 cheeseburgers. And, he came for the golf, but he knew he was going to stay for the cheeseburger. And if he played really well, he might treat himself to a second cheeseburger. So I hope Tyler hears that.
Well, I don't know if I built this episode and thinking, how am I going to include the Etna Acres cheeseburger in the conversation without just asking the question?
We should have brought you a T-shirt. We've got it on a shirt at the course now. It's got the logo on the front, and then on the back it says, "Come for the golf, stay for the cheeseburger." And if you knew Joby, my grandmother, she would have killed us for putting that on a T-shirt.
She used to make all the kids for the golf matches, because different golf teams know to have the cheeseburger, but she'd make them raise their right hand and take an oath not to talk about the cheeseburgers. And it just, people still remember taking that oath.
I didn't take that oath. I've actually brought up the Etna Acres cheeseburger on multiple occasions on this podcast.
Oh,
So
Well, if we weren't doing this at 9 a.m, we could have had a cheeseburger in here.
I think Bill Burrows has had a couple cheeseburgers.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I do expect in this next summer that the 3 podcast hosts, we're going to come out and have a cheeseburger, because of the 3 of us, I'm the only one that's had that honor.
Really?
And so I told them we're going to take a road trip and go get a cheeseburger.
Perfect.
My dad told a story once that he went down to the big PGA golf show in Orlando, Florida. Huge convention center. He walks in, and I don't think he got 10 steps in before this tall kid comes up and says, "You're Gene Kaufman at Etna Acres Golf Course," because he recognized the logo. And Dad said, "Yes." He said, "I had my best round of golf at Etna Acres Golf Course, and then the best cheeseburger ever." You're in Florida, and they're talking about cheeseburgers and golf.
Who's more competitive?
Between the 2 of us, probably me.
Yes, I would agree.
Best excuse you've ever heard for a bad round of golf?
Ooh, I don't know. For a bad round, I mean, I could say I tore my Achilles a couple years ago, and I couldn't play golf for a while. So when I came back, I was pretty bad. But I mean, I did have a legitimate excuse, I feel like.
Yeah, some people, when they come out with a cast on or something, they'll say, "I just couldn't hit it."
But those are all real. I don't know what a bad excuse would be.
You got me on that one.
One final question. One word to describe Etna Acres.
Family.
I like that word. That's awesome.
It's family. It's generational. And, to steal an Olive Garden slogan, when you're here, you're family. we're family at the golf course. And so when you come out, you get to be a part of the family and you can bring your family along with it. And it's really cool to involve other people in your own personal family story and the story of the business.
Well, thank you again for both of you for joining me in the studio today, sharing the history of Etna Acres. And I think our listeners will really feel the passion that you guys have for not just the sport, but for educating and passing the sport on to younger generation for them to enjoy for the rest of their life. This podcast is made possible by the generous supporters like Lisa Gilman Investment Fund, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the City of Wabash, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. Until next time, I'm Adam Stakeman, and this is ThriveIN Wabash County.